I recently asked ChatGPT to generate some decent SaaS ideas. My criteria were that it needed to fit in a 6-week window, and I wanted the ideas to be B2B and not consumer-facing. I also want the ideas to be something that's widely available already in the enterprise, but less so for small and mid-sized businesses. Also, I didn't want to rely on third-party APIs, and I didn't want another ChatGPT wrapper. I think the results were pretty good. There's some really good ideas in the list, and some I don't see the value in, to be honest. I think the personalized employee onboarding assistant could be a pretty good idea. The internal survey and polling tool is also probably a decent idea, but I don't think that's an underserved niche. The company policy and compliance tracker also I thought was pretty neat. I don't really want to deal with compliance stuff though, so no. The automated team stand-up tool might be a winner too. And the meeting notes and action tracker also might be good. Even with all the tools we have available now, there really isn't a good solution for that, I don't think. Not that I know of at least, so I went with that one. The next step was to ask ChatGPT what features an MVP would have, and it gave us meeting creation and basic info, real-time or editable meeting notes, action items and task assignments, notifications and reminders, search and filter options, basic dashboard and overview page, simple user roles and permissions, export meeting notes. I don't think that one's quite as important, but we'll keep it in the list for now. The others, though, I think they're pretty good. Next, I asked ChatGPT to break up those MVP requirements into user stories and list them in order of importance. It kept the same priority order, but it did break them into actionable items. For this project, I'm going to stick with ASP.NET Core MVC, no Angular or React, plain old MVC. We'll use Entity Framework, of course, and a SQL database. I have Cursor open, and I'm going to call my project Nucleus, like Nucleus, but for meetings. The very first thing I'm going to do is create a .cursor rules file. In my browser, I'll go to cursor.directory. This site has good examples of cursor rules files, but whatever you take, just make sure to edit for your own uses. There's 4 available for C#, and this one's for Blazor. This one's for Unity. The third one looks promising. C#, ASP.NET Core, EF Core. I'll copy that one. And the fourth one's also for game dev in Unity. So we are taking number 3. Back in Cursor, I'll paste what I copied and prune out what I don't need. I'm going to remove anything related to APIs. We're using MVC, not APIs, and I don't want Cursor to get confused when it's generating the code. I don't need API documentation or stateless API authentication or API testing or API design at all, really. This might be obvious, but I want to remind Cursor that this is an ASP.NET Core MVC project. Sometimes it just gets confused. Save and close. Next, I'll open a new terminal so I can create the project. .NET new MVC -AU individual. This will create the project with auth enabled, where users can sign up for their own accounts. Next, I'll open the AI pane. If you don't have the Composer tab, I'll put a call out at the top of the video that shows how to enable it. And I'm going to paste in some basic instructions for Cursor to scaffold out the model objects for this project. I had these prepared beforehand. First, I want the app to be multi-tenant, which means many different companies can use it, and an organization will be used to group many different users into a smaller group. All of the model objects need to be directly or indirectly linked to the organization through their relationships with other objects. I also want to extend the app user to collect the full name and organization name during a user's registration. And because not all meeting attendees will be in the organization, I do need some type of contact object to track them with. A meeting model object is also needed, and it should track the typical stuff like date and time, duration, location, and so on, but also track an assigned note taker. And again, attendees for the meeting can either be organization users or contacts, which will need to be created before the meeting is scheduled or during that scheduling process. And meetings can be recurring. We'll track who attends with the attendee object. An action item object is also needed, and action items are only assigned to app users, never to contacts. I'm going to also say that action items are related to meetings. We need a model object for notes. Notes are related to meetings and can be entered by the meeting organizer or the designated note taker. If a note is actionable, an action item needs to be created for it. We also need a model object for attachments. Attachments might be related either to a meeting or an action item, and that relationship is one-to-many. Meetings and action items might have many attachments, but attachments will only ever be related to one single meeting or single action item. And last but not least, I'm telling Cursor that the default or base namespace for this project is Nucleus. If you don't specify what the default namespace is, it'll create everything with the namespace of your namespace. All right, I'll press enter and we can take a look at the code it creates. There's organization, app user, and contact.
And here's your friendly reminder to like and subscribe. We post new videos often for software developers, software engineers, and software architects. Thanks.
Meeting and the meeting attendee, note and action items. You need to try to repress your instinct to fix errors as the code's being created. You really need to wait until after that creation process has completed. Things will get out of whack if you don't. No errors. I'm a bit surprised. That usually doesn't happen. Let's create a migration. .NET EF migrations add initial model creation. If this command doesn't work for you, you probably need to install the EF tools. You can search Google for that. It's a pretty simple process. And then .NET EF database update. Cool, it worked. Let's take a look at the database. So Cursor didn't add the new objects to the DB context. Let's fix that. Add the model objects to the DB context. While that's running, I'm going to delete the appdb file and the migrations folder. Since there's no data in there yet, it's pretty fast just to recreate it. Now I'll go and create the migration again. .NET EF migrations add initial create. And after that finishes, I will execute .NET EF database update. And now all of our model objects are there. Okay. So at this point, we've reached a pretty good spot. The code compiles, the migration's been applied. I want Cursor to implement an account controller and implement the login, register, log out, confirm email, register confirmation, and lockout action methods. And the views, of course. I'll also remind Cursor that I want to get the user's full name and their organization name. And I want the organization created at the same time as the user. And I want the user associated to the organization. Also, I'm running Papercut SMTP. So I do have a mail server listening on port 25 locally. So I want the emails to be sent so I can make sure things are working correctly. I want the email settings stored in appsettings.json. And finally, I want the navigation links and the underscore login partial to be updated to point to these new action methods. And again, refrain from trying to correct things until Cursor's finished its creation process. If the video looks a little fast, it's because it is. I sped it up so you wouldn't have to sit through the tedium of me fixing the small errors one after another. And I find the most common thing I have to clean up with behind Cursor are references to different namespaces. I think it should be able to figure it out, but it took a couple of minutes to create this, and it probably would have taken me an hour to do so. So I'll just go behind and do my duty and clean up. And this is yet another interesting error. There is the risk that the callback URL will be null. If I did this code myself, I'd probably throw an exception. Ideally, it would roll back, but for now, I think this will be fine. And it looks like the login view model wasn't created. Let's just have Cursor fix that up as well. So it is going through and creating all the views now. At the beginning, it only created the register view. Well, we'd had to do it eventually, so now it's better than later. I'm going to do a .NET build to make sure that we have all the compile tab errors out of the way. Here's another interesting error. I think this happens when a file hasn't been saved and Cursor kind of gets confused on whether or not it should save your changes or keep its changes. It's just a conflict, I guess. Anyway, I'll save all and we'll see how far we get. Hopefully that'll be the last one. I'll clear the console and then .NET build. Still errors. I think this one is because the view doesn't know where login view model is. So I'll change that to be the fully qualified name. Unfortunately, it looks like register is the same way. Do another save, and then we're on what, build 3, 4? I didn't really keep track. Okay, good build. .NET watch run. Okay, this time we get a runtime error. I'll copy the gist of the error and see what Cursor does with it. I'm getting this error when launching the site. When I hit these runtime errors, I do have better luck stopping the run and restarting it after. If you're doing simple stuff like UI changes, it should be fine to pick them up. But if you're changing anything substantial, especially program CS, it's definitely better to stop and restart. So the identity wasn't fully configured. Okay, that's good. Cursor wants me to also delete the database migrations and reapply them. Well, it's easy to do. Delete and delete. Better make sure the build works. You never know. Okay, no errors in the build. That's a good thing. Next, .NET EF migrations, add initial migration. Then .NET EF database update. Okay, one more time. .NET watch run. I'll head on over to the register page. Test user for full name. Test organization for organization name. Test@test.com for the email, and then the random password Chrome created for me. You want to make sure, unless you've adjusted the default password settings, you need at least one lowercase letter, one uppercase letter, one number, and one special digit in the password. And I think it has to be like eight characters long. And before I click the register button, I want to open the DevTools so I can watch that network call or see console errors that happen. Hopefully nothing will go wrong, but we'll see. Nice, mine worked. And I have the paper cut page open so I can see the email that was sent. Just hit refresh, and there it is. If I click on that link, it will confirm the email address, and I can test the login. Bam, excellent, we're up and running. I won't test the other functionality for lockout or reset password yet, but we'll get to them eventually. In the next video, we'll build out the meeting creation process and see how far we can get. Until next time, happy coding.